Welcome to the Remote First podcast. Every week we invite guests from large or innovative companies to share their insights on enabling an equitable and distributed workplace experience. I'm your host, Daphne Laforêt. Welcome to another episode of the Remote First podcast. Today, as part of our Startups for Remote Work series, we're welcoming Jakob Knutzen, founder and CEO of Butter and virtual workshop platform that is disrupting the way we work. So for those who are joining over audio today, this podcast is actually initially recorded on video using the Butter platform. So if you want to take a look at it, then jump right in the show notes to access the video link. So here we are. Thank you for joining, Jakob.
Thank you so much for having me, Daphne.
Super nice. So tell me, Jakob, why did you decide to start Butter?
So kind of my slightly longer story is I started out my career in strategy consulting, where I spent roughly 4 years in what's now Bain & Company. Then left for Indonesia, of all places, to build up a digital marketing agency in Jakarta, which we built up and sold off to some Japanese entrants into Southeast Asia. So quite the story of its own. Stuck around in Asia for another couple of years, and then went back to Denmark in 2018. My wife and I wanted to get back home and get closer to the family. But I also wanted to build something that was a bit more scalable than building, both consult or being part of consultancy or being part of agency, where you're essentially selling man hours, but also doing lots of workshops. So I started a company within the area of game streaming. So I'm a big gamer myself, and was pretty excited about doing like a tech startup that was more scalable, but within an area that I was personally quite passionate about. So that was Streamcrux, and started towards the end of 2018. Got some great people on board, but we didn't quite find, what's popularly known as product market fit. Essentially, we created a nice community of game streamers, but the product wasn't growing as fast as we really wanted. So we tried to raise some money, but didn't succeed. And when that investment round fell through in January of 2020, we said, okay, we had a good run on this, but let's shut Streamcrux down. But we really loved working together, kind of the core team of Streamcrux. And that would be myself and Chris, who has a product design background, and Adam, who has a tech background. So we had kind of this, I guess you could kind of call it the holy trinity of startup founders. So the hipster, the Chris, the product designer, the hacker, Adam, the CTO, and the hustler, or I guess myself, who can sell a little bit and do stuff. So we thought, okay, let's stick together and build something together. But this time around, let's make sure that we identify a real problem. That was the main issue of Streamcrux, was we had simply not nailed the real problem to solve. So in February of 2020, we spent quite a bit of time looking at various areas, and one of the areas we were looking at was remote work. So we had been working in Streamcrux as a remote team, or remote first, a little bit of a hybrid, but actually a remote first team. Adam, he's Malaysian and based in Jakarta. So we had kind of already had quite a bit of experience working as a remote team, so had experienced a few of the problems that you've seen there. We already back then believed that remote was for sure the future. Saw so many amazing opportunities in, for instance, talent acquisition and just speed of development, doing a lot of things. So quite excited about that part. But we didn't find the problem like before COVID struck, like 1 month later. And then we got the idea of, why not use the experience that we kind of had from building a remote team in Streamcrux and help the companies that have now been pushed remotely to work better as remote teams. So kind of help out using our experiences and global best practices, and do do actual workshops to train these startups or teams that have been pushed remotely. So we started something that we called Remote Camp, which was essentially a workshop program for startups and teams that have been pushed remotely by COVID. Firstly, to kind of just help these guys out, but for sure with the thought of, let's find a problem that all of these guys have, so we can build a software solution around it. So we thought that doing these workshops was the best way to identify that problem. But what we then experienced was that when we started doing these workshops, they were just so tough to facilitate. Like, again, when I'm saying workshops in the context, this was training sessions for 10 to 20 people in course material that we developed, but highly interactive because you needed to kind of have them co-create these best practices for their own teams. So what we saw there was that, in spite of myself and actually also Chris having had quite a bit of physical workshop experience doing loads for myself back in strategy consulting and in agency, it was just very difficult to kind of conduct interactive and engaging workshops online. And that was where we got the idea for Butter. So now we're around April 2020. What we saw were these two big problems. One problem was the technical overload that you as a facilitator was facing. We were using Zoom alongside, I think it was like Miro and Mentimeter and Kahoot. So a number of different tools. And then, of course, like Google Slides. And we were trying to pull all of these things together. And we ended up spending more time focusing on the technology and pushing buttons and, sending out links, and then people would drop off and they wouldn't be able to click the right link. And so we ended up focusing more time worrying about the technology than we were on actually facilitating the session. So that was the one big thing that we saw. Second thing we saw was just creating energy in the session was extremely difficult. So getting people excited and pumping them up, which is just an important part of doing a workshop. It's important that, of course, to have great material, but it's just as important that people are kind of sitting in on the edge of their chairs and actually engaging in the conversations, right? So these were two things that we just found was super difficult to do with Zoom. And the various tools we were using. So we wanted to kind of create Butter to essentially bridge that gap, to create a tool that is built solely for workshop facilitators. So allowing people to set up a lot of stuff up front to kind of take that load off of their minds so that everything's set up the way you want it to be. And secondly, having a lot of integrations so you can pull all of these things into one place. And thirdly, just creating something that is inherently more delightful and exciting and kind of gets people out of their chairs when they work. So I guess that's kind of that's the slightly longer story on how I got.
It's a very good story because you answered a lot of questions I already had in mind that I wanted to lay it out. And you just like took the floor, and that's exactly. It's really interesting everything that you shared, because there are definitely a lot of challenges that come with virtual workshopping. Like, I've been going through this as well. I definitely relate to that kind of like multiple tools, trying to make your workshop very interactive and bringing all the plugins and extra things you can bring in. If you can have it all in one place, is definitely much easier. Why is it called Butter? This is the first thing when I heard someone, Ross, we had on the podcast earlier, when he mentioned butter, I was like, butter? Like butter? Like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't understand like what it was. And then I thought it was a funny name, and I want to know like where does it come from?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and something I'm actually hearing quite a few people ask me. We initially started saying that we were like, when we were just brainstorming names, honestly, this whole myth of startup names being very thought through, it's a total myth, right? It's so random sometimes, right? So we were just brainstorming names, and then one person from the team said like, oh, aren't we making meetings smooth as butter? And then, okay, what could we do with this? Oh yeah, meat butter. We'll like, yeah, okay, meat butter, that sounds good. So our initial name was actually Meat Butter, which was a bit long, but I mean, yeah, okay, we're making meetings smooth as butter, so okay, it's interesting. But then as we got more and more American users, a lot of them thought that, oh, it's meat butter, like a chunk of meat and butter. That's super weird. Like, what's up with these guys, right? We even had some people saying, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot use this because my team are vegans, so we don't really do this. Like, meat and butter, that's just too much for us.
And butter still doesn't work with vegans.
No, exactly. No matter. But it was less... it was more palatable, I guess. So we dropped the meat. We even like made a meme with the Obama mic drop with the meat drop instead, and said we were dropping the meat.
Oh my god!
And switched to just butter. So we had a bit of fun with that. It's nice.
So now it's just butter, though.
Now it's just butter. Yeah.
Butter.us, which is from the US.
Yeah. Butter us. So that was the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Butter Us. Okay, yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to have a look at it, you can go on butter.us for the platform. Um, so we are using Butter today, and we are in the platform. For those who are listening, you can go have a look in the show notes and then look at the video if you want to see a bit more about how it looks like. It's a pretty cool tool. So, like, what is it all about? Like, why is Butter making workshops more smooth?
That's a great question. Again, it relates a bit to the problems I believe we're solving. So the first thing that we're doing is we're thinking not of Butter as a video conferencing tool. We're thinking of it as an all-in-one workshop platform. So, and what we mean by that is we enable facilitators both before, during, and after the workshops, and that relates very much to the fact that workshops are by their nature complex collaborative sessions. They are the most, we can say, the most complex type of, or they're arguably the most complex type of session that you can have online. Therefore, a lot of work goes into preparing a workshop. Anyone that's facilitated a workshop knows that writing a full workshop script and ensuring that you know exactly what things goes in there, what timings you'd like to have, where you might want to double down. Like, there's just a lot of planning. The activities that go there in there. There's a lot of planning that goes on in kind of conducting a successful workshop. And that planning often goes in two different chunks. So one thing is the facilitator's own, scripts and show notes, and the second chunk is the stuff that people actually see, so the activities that goes on, the agenda, etc. What we allow workshop facilitators to do at the moment is set up all of the activities that the participants would see in the session or be part of in the session for the facilitators to set that up front. So one example would be you already have an agenda, so you can set up your entire agenda up front in Butter. You know that during the first point you'll have a poll going on, so you're able to set up two different polls in Butter. Then on the second point you've got a breakout session with talk to the guy or girl next to you, so you're able to set like randomized teams of 2 breakouts up front. On the third point you might have, we've got 2 big groups of 5 people, so you're already setting that breakout up as well. So that's one example of the pre-planning you can do. Also, for instance, you might use a Miro board later in the session. So you're able to preload the Miro board in Butter and load directly in Butter for people to collaborate in Butter when you've got that Miro board going. A YouTube clip, all of these different things, you can pre-plan them and basically run them directly in Butter. So that's the main kind of functionality that we're doing to offload workshop facilitators.
That's one thing that impressed me actually when I discovered Butter was that I attended a workshop and then when I went in and there was a Miro board shown and I was like, oh, where is the link to access the Miro so I can, and then realizing that actually the platform is integrated, so you don't even have to get out of the platform. You can directly edit from the Butter platform, like an anonymous user. Like, yep. You did a connection there, like you guys, smart people. There's a really good integration. So there's like Google also Drive integration, and I was quite impressed by that. I thought it was quite interesting. Of course, then now I guess you will probably become a bit more like so on video you can see it if you want to join the video, but you can. I guess at some point you will kind of have to create a marketplace of all the apps that people are using, or like, how do you see that scale in a way that people must be asking so much stuff because people in the virtual world now have all their apps they're using. Some are on the Teams side of things in Microsoft. Some are like using, other Notion and all sorts of things like that. So how do you see that growing, this kind of integrations?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think, so one of the most important things as a startup, which we very much still are, is to focus. So to begin with, we're focusing very much on kind of a core set of users that are using a core set of integrations, and we're making sure that those integrations just work super smoothly and awesome, right? So, and we will slowly be adding more integrations. We're in talks with a number of other providers for integrating on Butter, but we want to make it highly curated, where we make sure that the experience is as good as humanly possible. in the future, of course, then we can start relinquishing a bit more control, and allowing for more of a marketplace, or like as you're talking about, like an app marketplace in terms of integrations. But I think that there we're talking at least 2-3 years down the line, because we need in the early days to have that extreme amount of control. And overall, it's something that we believe very heavily in Butter, is that we need to design this tool for workshop facilitators from the ground up, and actually have a lot of control over how that design is. For instance, like we do love Zoom, and I've been a huge Zoom user for like 5-6 years. But the issue with Zoom is that they've built very much layers upon layers upon layers. So they've just been adding features on top, which makes it quite powerful in a lot of ways, but it also makes it a bit more confusing and less intuitive when it comes to, for instance, facilitating complex sessions. So we want to make sure that we are always intuitive, and that we offload people technically, not just put extra stuff on top, if that kind of makes sense.
And when you say facilitators, are you only talking of those who are just doing facilitation as their profession? Or could this be also used, for example, as a team lead in a company, and kind of be able to have access to that platform within their company? It's also,
I think that's
accessible for them.
that's such a great question. So I think we're looking at it a bit like an onion, right? So I think the hardcore group are the facilitators that facilitate very much for a living, that do like workshops almost on a daily basis, workshops or trainings. That's just all they do, right? The second layer are people that are, for instance, consultants or others, where workshops are part of their offering, where they might be creating a strategy, and they might be having strategy workshops at pivotal points of that strategy creation. So they're not power users, but they're still like heavy workshop, or still do a lot of workshops. And then you're totally right. The next layers are the team leads and the people that are doing like maybe training sessions now and then, or they are essentially having to facilitate more complex team meetings, right? I think you had Layla from Mural on the show a few times ago, and I remember her saying something like facilitation just becoming a core skill in a remote first world, and that really resonated with me, because it's exactly what we're thinking, right? I mean, facilitation and like when you have an online meeting, it just puts so much more pressure on the host of that meeting, or the facilitator of that meeting, to correctly facilitate it and make sure that people don't speak on top of each other, that the right takeaways are taken, that everything goes through. And it does put more pressure on both the planning of that meeting, and that's kind of what we want to offload. We want to offload the facilitators, and we do believe that essentially like now we're saying we're building Butter for workshops, and that's true, but essentially we are in reality building Butter for facilitators. And in the future remote first world, like everyone that has a team, even everyone in a team that is running a session, or that is within their area of expertise, they are at one point a facilitator, and those are the ones that we want to help out. If that makes sense.
I mean, the main question that people are asking now is, like, the companies that are wanting to continue in the digital first world is like, how do I make my meetings more engaging? How do I get my team together? People feel like they lost a bit that sense of being the conductor of their orchestra and feeling that the feedback coming back. And there's really a big need for that, of just wanting to keep the energy going in my team. And it's true that actually a platform like that can probably help them to get to that level of engagement that they were so missing from the in-office experience that they are used to.
And I think that was actually one of the first thoughts that we put in Butter, was this. Now I'm showing it on the video. It's this hands up queue where you can put up your hand, right? And you can, as a facilitator, select the person that's put up their hand. And there's a queue, so everyone can queue with when they want to say something, with either a question, a comment, or an idea. And that's the first step in kind of facilitating a successful meeting online, is like this basic idea of making sure that whoever speaks at that time, they speak, but also making people more mindful about the fact that, hey, like there's actually two other people waiting queue after me, so let's not hog all that time. So there's a lot of thoughts around how like we can make the flow, or the meetings or the workshops or whatever, the sessions flow more smoothly. That's kind of one of the core concepts of what we're building.
No, it's really nice to see that, these past year, that's why I wanted to have this kind of like remote first startup series, because there's so many people who came in with like, we're building new solutions for this problem, which is now the virtual workshops, how to make things more engaging, have like a bit of a sense of it, the team and the energy. So that's really a good one. So I'm really glad that you built that. How do you see it evolve as, companies are trying now so much to kind of keep a bit of the real estate they were having, because it worked well in the bubble of like everybody went remote? Will you focus more in the future on those who just stay virtual and decide to be like, this is the way we're working? Or do you see that product as something that could be used in a hybrid world? It doesn't have to be, but do you see it like something that could work for hybrid world as well?
That's a good question. It's been something that's been on my mind a lot, to be honest. Like how will this how will butter look post COVID? I think a number of thoughts are there. Again, the first thing is this. Again, focus is everything for a startup, and we will continue on remote first workshops for at least the next 6 to 12 months, and just cracking those, making sure that they are like everything works perfectly there. But we're already now thinking about how interactions could look like. We've had discussions on what interactions could look like in Butter for hybrid workshops. And I think there are two overall points on this. Firstly, again, the fact that we're building this as an all-in-one tool, both before, during, and after, it just means that there's a lot of the workshop planning and a lot of the workshop debriefs, so the before and the after, that just makes sense regardless of whether it is remote or non-remote. Also, another thing is that we're thinking about this, like the during component, as being both synchronous and asynchronous. Like in good workshops, there's both synchronous components where people sit and talk together, but there's also homework, the asynchronous component. So all of that stuff, it basically makes sense regardless of whether it's a hybrid workshop or whether it is an in-person workshop or a remote or fully remote workshop. Sorry. The second part is this idea of actually allowing people during the workshops to interact with Butter from their phones, for instance, right? So even if you have a hybrid workshop with, we all know that this is not best practice on hybrid to have only one video feed, but I'm sorry, it's gonna happen. We know it's gonna happen with several people like sitting in a room with just one video feed there, right? But then the other people could pick up their phone and then be able to raise their hand on the phone or interact in chat on the phone, etc. In the during component. So we do have some initial thoughts on how Butter is gonna work on hybrid. The fact that the value prop is still ultra strong because it is an all-in-one tool on the hybrid is a certainty. The question is more how do we make sure that the interactions are smooth on hybrid and don't lose some of that personality that we've infused Butter with on the remote part.
So, and in general, what is the feature you think you're the most excited about that is like maybe something coming up or something that you are just in general very excited about in your platform?
Oh, yeah. So we've got something coming up that's called the Workshop Builder. And that is, so at the moment, right, I mean, Butter's not at all fulfilling the vision of becoming like the all-in-one tool. Right now, you can set up a lot of these things about. You can create the agenda, you can set up breakout rooms, you can set up the mirror, all of that stuff. But it's all like individual things that you still have to click during the session. What we're building and what we're envisioning is a full workshop builder where you can almost like drag and drop components. So you, like imagine you're like creating your entire agenda, and then you can drag and drop little boxes of activities in under each agenda point. And as a facilitator, you can simply click go, and then you can click next, based on just going to the next activity. And what we're doing then is also having, almost like a theater play, like you're the conductor, right? So you'll have intermissions, big splash screens that kind of takes over in between the various activities and acts, keeping up the energy. So it both kind of fulfills that vision of allowing to take off the technical overload because you're just pre-planning everything. It's like a full script, right? And secondly, it creates that energy of, and the dynamism of every, agenda point, every activity is the change in pace that kind of keeps everyone on their toes. And this is so this is something I'm super excited about, which I really think will just take Butter to the next level.
Well, we can really feel your energy and your excitement, and that's so important when you're starting a product, also to like really have that excitement. So thank you so much for coming in today and just sharing your excitement and your enjoyment for virtual workshops. And so for those who want to learn more, you can go on butter.us for accessing the platform and have a little bit of a look. There are also some workshops that are happening that you can join that are like basically for testing out the platform. I definitely sold on this platform. So maybe I'm a little biased now after trying it for a few weeks now. But thank you so much for building that, Jakob. It's really cool. And thank you for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me.